Hey everybody. So I'm going to jump into this Bible study. So let's just say a quick prayer. Father God, thank you so much for all of your blessings. Thank you for the wisdom that you have bestowed through us. Thank you for our creativity. Thank you for the dominion that you have placed within us, the authority that you've placed within us. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to extend that and to exert that power in Jesus' name. Okay, so we're in Proverbs 17, and I wanted to just highlight a few things today. So the first verse, better is a dry morsel and quietness therewith than a house full of sacrifices with strife. So on this point, I just wanted to share part of what I have experienced. Growing up in a household with alcoholism, you know, my father was a very loud, critical person, and he definitely let us know what he wanted, what he didn't want. And whether you label that narcissist or narcissism, that is a possibility. But he definitely, in my mind, taught me a lot of what not to do. Okay. It doesn't mean that I don't fall short sometimes. It doesn't mean that I don't get my feathers ruffled. I do. I am human. But I've worked very hard to not be in certain ways like my dad. In other respects, I try to take the positive traits of my dad and to, you know, expand on those traits. So, for example, my dad was very loud, okay, and he was very critical. So when he came home for dinner, it was like everything had to be like just so. And so pretty much we were all walking on eggshells. You know, it was like we had to have our homework done. We had to have the place looking great so that when he came in, it was like all of our eyes were focused on him at dinner time and what his day was like. And we listened to what he had gone through. And sometimes as a child, listening to adult things, this was hard because, you know, number one, we didn't have the maturity to understand some of these large concepts or large, you know, adult problems. But yet we were sitting at the table where we were witnessing that and observing that and being a part of it, whether we should have or not. The other thing is when it came time to like ask questions about our homework or, you know, a project that we were working on, it would be like we would be delegated. My mom would make sure that my dad knew, oh, Anne's working on this, you know, speech and, you know, visual project, and she wants to get your help because she's done this research and she wants to make sure if she should go in this direction or that direction and she needs your help. So my mom would kind of soften it like, hey, we need your help, Dad, in these particular areas. But my dad was a person that, you know, when he got home from work, he wanted to drink. He wanted to be in the basement or in his garage or wherever we lived at the time. He wanted to be doing and tinkering around with his little projects, and he wanted to be drinking his beer, and he did not really want to be playing the role of a father or of a dad. And so he would get irritated that his time was being, you know, taken. And, you know, I'm not saying that this is the right way to be. I'm just sharing this is how I grew up. So I would walk into the garage and I'd be like, Dad, you know, I'm working on this project and, you know, I was wondering, can you look at all the things I've cut out from magazines? And I wanted to find out if this is a better way to make my project go. Can you review it before I glue everything down? And my dad would be like, Anne, why do you wait until the last minute? I wasn't waiting till the last minute. I was waiting for the opportunity to have a conversation with my dad, not flying off the handle. Okay. But the bottom line is I had to wait until he was ready. And sometimes that meant that the project's due the next day. Like I've done all my research, but I haven't glued everything down because I'm still waiting for that direction from my father. And I wanted to get an A. You know, my goal as a student was to get an A. So I'm not looking for getting a D and getting by. Like I want the A, and I've done the homework and the research to show my diligence that I've done my homework. Okay. And so my dad would see all this stuff, and at first he would be annoyed, like, I'm wasting his time. He'd rather be sitting outside doing one of his garage projects. But he would come in and he'd see on the dining room table that I'd have my project all scattered out and all the different, you know, images and I'd have my paper written and what I was trying to prove. And he's like, oh, okay. You really did a good job with this. Okay, wow. And this is great. Well, if I were you, see, that's where I'd have to pay attention. If I were you, I would focus on just, showing, the plantations that you see here. And why don't you go ask your mother for some cotton, and you can put and glue some real cotton on this poster that you've made here, and that will make it more interesting. And go out in our garden and go get some corn kernels and glue the corn kernels on for the field, and that will make it three-dimensional instead of you just coloring like you did here. And again, that was a great idea, okay? And so the point is, I wanted my father's input. I had the basic idea, but he sometimes knew how to push that idea further, and I respected him for his creativity, and I respected him to take my idea to the next level, and I knew that he would channel me in that direction because I did respect him. It doesn't mean I respected everything about him. It means that when he was willing to be focused on the task at hand, on the project at hand, he could be very helpful and very encouraging. But I didn't like all the other wrath around it that I had to get through. But I did have to learn how to be patient. I did have to learn how to sometimes schmooze him in order to get his attention so that I could get my needs met, because I had deadlines for these projects. Now, needless to say, I got an A+ on that project with, the plantations and explaining, different types of agriculture and farming and that sort of thing. So I did do well on that paper and on that presentation. But what I'm getting at is that better is a dry morsel and quietness in growth therewith than in the house full of sacrifices with strife. Meaning, trying to deal with my dad with all of his strife, sometimes it was really difficult. And I did really advance my ideas in quiet, in the library, in my bedroom, working on my project, sitting at the dining room table, getting all the pieces, spread out, and then looking at my ideas in little chunks and then reorganizing it to make the speech presentation, to make the poster board. And then when I got to that level of clarity, that's when I brought my dad in, when I had already done all the other research. But the thing is that sometimes having to deal with all that strife and his raw criticism, which sometimes really wasn't very nice, number one, it built my backbone. It also built in me the desire to speak up for myself. And if I thought my dad was wrong or that he wasn't understanding my idea completely, I would correct him. And I'd be like, Dad, no, you're not getting it. That's not what I'm saying at all. This resource says this, and this resource says this. And my commentary on that is I'm trying to prove this point. And then he'd be like, oh, okay, all right. I stand corrected. Thank you for correcting me. I renege what I had said before, and I give you the authority to proceed through because I think your ideas are concrete, and I think that you're going to, have success with this idea. But the point is, I still had to go through a lot of strife in order to get the end result. Sometimes I had to take a stand against my father. Now, what happened over time is that my father started to respect me. There were times that he didn't, because he's a man and I'm a woman, and he thinks women are less than men, and that was his philosophy. But the point is that I demonstrated over and over again that I respected him, and I also respected his opinion when it came to important things. And so when I showed and demonstrated that I did my homework, and that I was all in, and that I really was only seeking his counsel and advice because I had already done my homework, then he really respected me. And he was like, Ann, you're on the right path. I think you're great. I think if you go with this one persuasive, thought, and then you back it up with these facts, you're good. You're golden. So what I'm getting at is, sometimes when I look at this today, okay, in today's reality, I live in an apartment by myself, and I enjoy my private time. I enjoy my creative time. I enjoy my God time. I enjoy being in this prayer closet where I'm reading my Bible. I enjoy the downloads that the Lord gives me. I enjoy all the research and, just the process of how like one idea like jumps to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. And I really appreciate that quiet time with the Lord. And then when I really get the concept that he's trying to get me to like follow on, that like I'm taking action. And then the end result is that, hey, I've completed that paper and I got an A+ on that paper. But it's because I was listening, number one, what the Bible said about those same topics that I was researching. So like if I'm studying about being an entrepreneur and I was writing a paper for my entrepreneurship class, like I'm not just writing about what I want to do as an entrepreneur. I'm writing about what is an entrepreneur, what does the Bible have to say about, ruling and reigning and building and what is important in those principles. And so then I'm carrying that in my paper on entrepreneurship. Does that make sense? So what I'm getting at is I prefer living in peace. I prefer living alone. I prefer, really letting God lead me and being in my quiet cave like David. When I am ready to share my idea, okay, I'm going to go to my coaches. So if I have a biblical question, I'm going to go to my biblical coach. And that's plural, coaches, okay? If I have a question and I need some life skills enhancement, like I have this certain level, but I need to level up, I'm going to call one of my life coaches and I'm going to ask specifically about that part where I'm lacking and where I'm weak. I'm going to ask that person to tell me, what do they see about me and where do they recommend, what books do they recommend for me to go? And then I'm going to be in that and I'm going to follow that path and get those books and read those books. And then I'm going to come back for an accountability checkup with my life coach. And I'm going to say, I read these books. I saw this about myself. This is where I'm lacking. This is where I need to level up. But what I was confused about is ABC. Okay. That's called accountability. I have people, counselors, in the multitude of counselors, there is wisdom. I have multitudes of counselors that counsel me, okay? But I first need to do my work. I first need to make my Ben Franklin list of my positives and my negatives. And then I need to then carry that out in my community with the people that are at a different level than I'm at, and I'm seeking their counsel. I'm seeking their advisory on my particular situation and my particular context. So for example, if I'm trying to repair my credit, I'm not asking, an average person or somebody that's like a friend. No, I'm going to a financial planner. I'm asking people that have authority and have wisdom over credit repair. What do I need to do after identity theft? And I'm following in that whole protocol and going down a list of items. And let me tell you, sometimes it takes time to repair and correct all of those items that are wrong. But I'm in that process, okay? So I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to jump down to, verse, where is it? Okay, verse 9. Okay, so Proverbs 17, verse 9. He that covers a transgression seeks love, but he that repeats a matter separates very friends. So I want to highlight this particular part, okay? And I'm going to make the distinction, okay? And I hope that this makes sense. I hired somebody to work in my company and they were doing a part of my furniture refurbishing, and we would paint and stain furniture and then I would resell that and put on better hardware. And that is a component of something that I have done in the past. And sometimes I take on very, selectively. But the point is I had delegated this particular piece of furniture to another person on my team. And this person was showing her portfolio and saying, oh, I've done this and I've done that. And I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. And so she demonstrated to me through her portfolio that she had the skills, she had the fine, little paintbrush skills for real fine detail, but then she also had, the skills to make the paint look seamless and flat, or put a gloss on it, or put a stain on it. And so she had already demonstrated in her portfolio that she had those skills. So I didn't feel like I needed to re-educate her on some of those things, because she already had a baseline education. So I basically said, here's the project, here's the piece. And it was a kitchen island. And I said, I want it to be this color. I want the hardware to be this. I want the countertop to be this. Here's the materials that I've already purchased. If you recommend something different, let me know. Use your judgment. Here's the paintbrushes. Here's this. Here's the, paint drop mat. I'd like you to do it in this space today. And then once it's dry or whatever, we're going to both together move this piece over to here. So I explained what I expected, but I also gave her leeway room to take her creativity, and I knew she had the skills. So she started to run with it, and it was great. She did an awesome job. Okay. But during this process, this particular person started to complain about other people in her community, in her workplace, and she was truly gossiping about these people. She was ratting on these people. She was being racial about these people. She was really being mean-spirited, okay? And in that, when I heard her say these things, because again, remember, I'm in one room, which is on the other side of my apartment, where I'm, at a different level, and I'm on Zoom calls, and I'm talking with clients one-on-one, but she was in a different room, in a different space, not in the same room with me. So I didn't hear what she was saying or talking on the phone or whatever. But when I took a break to go up and see what she had accomplished in that period of time, she was talking negatively. And then she started to talk negatively and gossip about these people. And it was like a conversation she had just gotten off the phone with. And then she was continuing and all that. And I stopped her immediately. And I was like, hey, I have authority over this building. I have authority over this room. And you will not talk like that about other people. Like, you are in my space, and this is a sanctuary. And if you don't have something nice to say, then don't say it. And if you have a problem with that person, you need to go directly and speak to that person. And if you don't have success with that, then what is it? Either Matthew 17 or 18. Then go get another person to go with you to then confront that person and have a come to Jesus meeting. And then if they still reject you, go to the church, tell the church, and then confront that person. And if they completely ignore you, they ignore another person with you, they ignore the church, then treat that person as if they are a tax collector or a heathen, and walk away and wipe the dust off your feet and don't go back. Now, here's the point. This was my space. She was basically crapping in my space with her negativity and with her gossiping. And so I said to her, here's the deal. You're not to talk like that anymore. This is a boundary. If you want to talk like that, go somewhere else and get off my property. You're not speaking like that inside, and you're not speaking like that outside. If you need to go in your car and have these conversations like that, do it in your car. But don't do it on my property. Don't do it on my patio. Don't do it in my basement. Don't do it where we're working, because you are messing up our alignment with God by doing that. And she did not like me confronting her. So she started to have and cop an attitude with me. And I said, here's the bottom line. You were hired to do this project. But doing that project means that you are doing that in the sanctuary of keeping this a clean space, of creating inspiration and encouragement. You're not coming in here to crap all over everything and then expect that there's not going to be consequences for that. So the point is, over time, okay, this was the point that I had to keep revisiting with this person, okay? And eventually it got to the point where I had to invite another person in and say, will you be with me during this time when she's going to be painting, and we want to both address her when she starts doing her thing, because when two or more are gathered. And so she did it again, and she started gossiping and talking really negatively about the people in her office. And so at that time, for that particular situation, I had my mom and me, and we were working on another project in the same room so that all three of us would be in the same room. And so when she started talking negatively, my mother, in addition to me, both directly confronted her and said, look, this is not the way that we handle ourselves in this space. You know, this is not the way. And you need to conform to the rules and the space, the energy that we're providing here. And if you don't want to listen, then you're going to need to leave. Okay. But it was, you know, it was like sometimes, like, even though I was the person that hired her to do this project, sometimes when there is another person that is older, wiser, and by physical appearance, they look older, sometimes somebody will not disrespect a more older person or an elderly person over someone that's closer in their age. And that's what happened. She was like, oh, I didn't mean to disrespect you, you know, Miss Hyland. I didn't mean to do that. And she's like, oh, okay, I'll go out to my car and have this conversation. I'm really sorry. Now, the point is, in that circumstance, I thought it was addressed. Okay. So I'm going to take this a step further, and I'm going to, you know, share with you another experience. So I was invited to her personal birthday party. Okay. And it was in a public restaurant. And so we're in this public restaurant, and it's her birthday, and her sister was there, and her brother-in-law was there, and me. So there's only 4 people. Okay. Small birthday party. And she starts with all the negativity, the complaining, the murmuring, the gossiping in a public place, in a restaurant, on her birthday. And she was really ratting on racial groups, like loudly. Like there were other people at other close by, nearby tables that were turning heads. And I was like, I cannot tolerate this. So I stood up at the table and I said, I will not listen to this any longer. You are disrespecting yourself. You're disrespecting me. You're disrespecting all the people in this room, and I will not have it. Like, if you need to have a direct conversation with this person and get it resolved, then go to that other person and get it resolved. But stop this nonsense. And I literally got up and I left. And I said, I love you. Happy birthday. But I am not going to subject myself to your insanity and your inability to understand that you're disrespecting people. Okay. Now, from that point, okay, I did not want to have anything to do with this person. Like, I was like, I'm done with the project. I'm done. Like, just, she did not have the willingness to confess. She didn't have the willingness to surrender, and she didn't have the willingness to understand that she needed to be discipled, and she wasn't willing to be discipled. Okay. So some time went by. And I then was invited to one of my cousin's birthday parties. And I knew that my cousins, man, they know how to have a party. They know how to do it up. And it's like music and food and just celebrating who we are. And it's just beautiful. They really do it up. So I'm like already on my way. Like I'm going to be going to this event. I had already decided I was going. But the Holy Spirit asked me to invite this person, the one that was such a jerk to all these other people and gossiping. And I was like, Lord, I don't want to invite this person. Are you kidding me? Like, that would be a catastrophe. And I'm thinking, there's no way. Okay. And I was like, okay. So I called her and I was like, hey, I'm going to this event today, and I don't know if you're busy or not, but is there any chance that you'd like to go? And if you do, I can meet you there, or I can pick you up. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'd love to go. Now we're outside of the event. And it's raining, and we're standing outside, and she did not like to get her hair wet. And I said, look, before we go in, I'm going to make a boundary. And this is what I'm going to say. I don't want to hear one negative comment coming out of your mouth. I don't want to hear one complaint. I don't want to hear any gossiping story about any person in your job or any person in your family or whatever. I don't want to hear it. And I said, we are going into a celebration. We are going into my cousin's birthday party. And I'm going to show you what celebration is all about. And we go in there, and there are balloons, and the tables are decked out, and there's all kinds of gift tables and dessert tables. And it was completely beautifully done. And my cousin and her family, they just know how to put on a celebration. Okay. That is a gift that they have. And so she's never seen anything like this. And she's like, oh my gosh, Anne, this is amazing. And I'm thinking, this is what God does for his children. This is how he blesses his children. This is how God celebrates a blessing, like a birthday, like this is the way that we do it in our family. We're not chintzy. We're not, like thinking out of poverty consciousness. Like, we do it up. And so, we get, we sit at a table, and she's sitting at the same table with me. And, she's just so thrilled, but yet also like, kind of like, I can't believe this is her mindset, because she's never seen anything like this before. She's never seen this type of abundance or prosperity or just fun, And, then my cousin, has a Down syndrome, son. And I knew that this person, that I was inviting to the party, that she had an interest in special needs. And I wasn't sure if that was just, a desire or goal that just kind of fell off or whatever, because by trade, she was an accountant. But the point is, I introduced her to my cousin and also to her Down syndrome son. And my friend was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, that was so incredible. And I learned this, and I gave her my number, and maybe I could be participating in this and that. So the point is, that birthday party, okay, was an opportunity for this girl to see that her way of celebrating birthday, of gossiping in a, and basically crapping in a perfectly good environment, like, that was her idea of a birthday party. And she soon realized that that's not really celebration. Like, and from seeing what celebration was, and what it could be, she was like, wow, this is so amazing. And look at all these balloons, and look at the dessert table. I've never seen so many options on a dessert table. Like, I've never been to an event like this. And at some point, she started to go into a story, and she started to complain about other people. Okay. And during this time, I just glared at her across the table, and I saw her, she goes, let me rephrase that. And she caught herself, and she thought a second, and then she reframed what she wanted to say. So there was improvement. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say it was perfect. It wasn't, but she caught herself, and she was starting to learn what was appropriate and what was not appropriate. But she learned it in the company of people that are appropriate. Okay. You're not going to learn appropriateness if you're in a drug den, or if you're surrounded by people that are smoking pot, that are talking out their butt, that have no concept of reality or what reality and responsibility are, and you're thinking that you're going to improve your situation by living in that type of environment. Hello, wake up. You're not. Like, you need to get out of that toxic environment in order to level up. You're not going to be able to sit with the turkeys and fly with the eagles. Turkeys don't fly with eagles. Okay. So, anyway, I hope that helps, that, in that context, that I'm trying to show you that when you have someone who's working for you, whether it's an employee or an intern or a contractor, and they're working with you on a project, you have dominion, you have authority over your space. And if they're not in alignment with what you're creating, and they're like basically crapping in your environment, you need to evict them. You need to kick them out. You need to direct them to what they're doing wrong and say, this is why you're being let go. Okay. Now, if you choose to give them an opportunity, like in this situation where I was like against all odds, I mean, her track record was, not good. Okay. But the Holy Spirit was like, Anne, I want you to invite her to this party. Okay. Now, the point is, I did, and I invited her to the party, and she saw what celebration was all about. So I invited her to see what reality could be for her. I invited her into the possibility that her idea of a negative, condemning, gossiping birthday party, and crapping on all the people around you and making people that are your nearby tables angry at you, didn't have to be her reality. Her reality could actually be a celebration with music and dancing and happiness and good food, and people that were excited to share about the blessings of their life. People that were excited to share about what good is happening in their life. People that were excited to show and share joy Okay? The joy of the Lord. So now I'm going to say an opposite thing, okay? Because I want you to see the context. Okay? First was with a person that's an employee, worker, coming into your environment. The next situation was in a public place to correct somebody when they're out of alignment. And another situation is to invite a person into an elevated, blessed state to show them this is how normal people that are blessed act versus what you were doing, which is insanity. Okay. But correction and, discipline needs to take place in part of your journey, or else you're just kidding yourself. So coming back to Proverbs 17, verse 9, he that covers a transgression seeks love, but he that repeats a matter separates very friends. Okay, so now we're going to go to teaching and preaching. Now, as a life coach, I'm going to be talking with lots of people on the phone, on a Zoom call, and in person in different workshops and different retreats, okay? And during all these events, I'm going to gather data, okay? I'm gathering data. I'm gathering data of, quote, prototypes of people. Like, kind of like this person acts this way when they're in this environment and they're under these influences. And this person over here acts a totally different way because they're under different influences and they have different advisors and they're going to act more appropriately. So when I'm teaching, I'm sharing sometimes my own personal experience. Sometimes I'm sharing a third-party story through maybe a combination of my clients that I've served, but I'm packaging it in a way, presenting it as one person, even though it might be a combination of several people to illustrate my point. Okay? It's about leveling up. So in this case, I'm going to talk about drug addicts in active addiction and narcissists. Now, in my situation, I was engaged to a drug addict and a narcissist, but let's be really clear. He never identified himself as someone who was in active addiction. He presented himself verbally and by his behavior as someone who had 31 years of recovery and being clean and sober. Now, when someone lies and they say that they're clean and sober, but in reality, they're still in active addiction, they're a liar. Okay? They're a liar. If they're going to use eye drops to cover up the fact that they're high, if they're going to chew gum to cover up that they're smoking when they're saying that they're not smoking, but they are smoking, if they're going to use different types of clothing, like maybe wearing long sleeve shirts all the time to not show their needle tracks on their arms, all of those things were cover-ups to hide the fact that he was in active addiction, that he was lying to me, his fiance, that he was lying to his family, that he was lying to my family, that he was doing all these things that were evil and wicked and creating much contention for himself and to everybody else around him. He was lying to his sponsor. He was lying to his therapist. He was lying to the rabbi. He was lying to the Christian counselor. Okay, so let's add all that up. That is a profile of a person that is in total rebellion and wickedness. That is also the definition of a narcissist, a person that is actively seeking to lie, steal, kill, and destroy. That is the definition of the devil, of the evil one. Okay, so I really want to get this point to come through. If I'm trying to help other women who have been traumatized, who have been victims of alcohol and drug addiction, victims who have been subject to identity theft from alcoholics, addicts, and narcissists in active addiction. That means that these particular women who have been traumatized, who have been victimized, who have had their identity stolen, who have had their life turned upside down, they are in a grieving state. They are in a state of repair, or they might just be in a state of shock after what had just transpired and what happened to them. Or they may still currently be in that toxic relationship, still married to a narcissist, still married to someone in active drug addiction. Okay? That's what I'm talking about right now. So when I highlight those people, the victims, the people that want to get out of oppression, okay, they need to learn skills to level up. So in order to learn those skills, I'm going to share specific details that I'm not hiding the sin. I'm directly confronting the sin head on, boldly. And I'm saying, if your fiance is creating trauma in your relationship, if your fiance is creating vile behavior in your relationship, if your fiance is creating, ways to steal from you, ways to physically abuse you and beat you, ways to mentally abuse you and make you feel less than, if your person, the traumatic, if the addict or narcissist is literally telling you that you're not good enough and that, you're creating all these problems when in fact the narcissist and the addict is actually creating all the problems, there needs to be a point where you need to have a come to Jesus meeting with yourself and possibly another person, such as a life coach, such as myself. I'm giving you this example. Then together, we're going to dissect what's really going on. Now, when I was in the midst and the throes of all of this craziness, the 3-ring circus that was upon me, okay, I did not know what I didn't know at that time, okay? But when I went to my coach, when I went to my biblical therapist, and I would recount what happened that week, and I'm going, this, and this happened, and it doesn't make any sense. But when I followed up with this, and this, I found that all those things were lies. And then my biblical counselor said, let's talk about what is in your responsibility, and let's talk about what's in his responsibility. And let's talk about where you need to set up more clear boundaries. Let's talk about where you need to build walls so that he doesn't have access to you. What he does in his own free time when he's away from you, if he's sticking needles in his arm, if he's going around whoring with whores, if he's bad-mouthing you over whatever platforms that he's on, that is him literally attacking, persecuting, and stalking you to cause harm to you. And then I would create a battle plan. I create a mental battle plan. I create a verbal battle plan. I'd have things that I had practiced over and over again by writing and saying them out loud, like my comebacks, man. Like, you will not talk to me like that. Click. Okay? If he showed up at my door and he's totally high and drunk and he's like, hey, but, can't even put a sentence together. The door is locked. He can bang on that door all day long. Guess what? The cops are going to come and he's going to get locked up and pulled away because he's disturbing the peace. But you're not going to act like that on my territory. You're not going to do that. No. You need to go into the chain of command. Okay. If I'm the fiance, then the person that is his, quote, sponsor in Narcotics Anonymous, the person that is his pastor or rabbi, those two men should be in his face. Okay? And then I'm going, hey, I'm praying for you. I'm encouraging you that you're going to overcome this. That's where I'm staying in my prayer. But right now, you're acting crazy, and I'm not going to accept your craziness. And you're not going to, crap on my parade. No, it's not happening. And you're not going to do it on my territory. If you want to act like a crazy person, you can do that somewhere else. But you're not going to bring that into my sanctuary. And you've already stolen from me, so there's all these boundaries. You're not going to have access to me like you used to. Okay? Because you've already broken that bridge. And you're going to have to prove that you're worthy by your behavior. And I don't believe your words because your words don't mean anything to me because your words have no integrity. So what I'm trying to describe in this portion that I just spoke about a narcissist, about an addict in active addiction, with the fact that that person who's calling me and asking for support and help, and they're saying, what should I do in this situation? And I'm listening to all these things that they're involved in, okay? And I'm going, we need to address the fact that we need to create an escape plan for you. We need to get your ducks in a row so that you can leave and exit this relationship safely. We need to build you up in your skills so that you can sustain yourself independent from this crazy person that is trying to destroy you. We were never meant to stay in a relationship with a crazy person. We were never meant to stay in a relationship with an addict in active addiction or a narcissist in active addiction. We weren't meant to do that. Okay? We were meant to be and surround ourselves with people that encourage us, that love us, and that discipline us and criticize us when we're out of